Welcome to In the Gutter, a podcast that is all comics, all bangers, all the time, with story expert Lani Diane Rich and superhero scholar Joshua Unruh. One of the hosts has read almost no superhero comics, and the other has read almost all of them. We'll let you sort out which is which. And now, In the Gutter.
All right, Lani, in this week's episode of Josh's fucking chicanery...
What's going on this week?
I have no heat in my house.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Now, we had 3 70-degree days this week. Mm-hmm. Those would have been great days for them to come put a new heater in my house. But they didn't do that. And so then it's been like in the 20s and 30s. And and I'm in a position where today, as we record, I'm like, oh, thank God it's in the 40s, which is not words that I want to use. But the thing is, the reason they didn't jump on those 70-degree days is because I need an entirely new heater. And my property manager said out loud, oh, we're not in the business of putting in new units. And I was like, that's the quiet part. What the fuck are you doing? Like, that's the subtext is dangerously becoming text, right? And then it continued, because that was after the first guy came out. They have had 3 different companies come out in hopes that one of them would say, we'll repair it. All 3 of them have been like, you got to switch it out. Amazing.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
Now, here's the part that I refused to tell you until we were on mic so that you could hear, so everybody could hear your outrage on my behalf.
My reaction. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
The second guy that shows up, I have to come home from work. So I come home from work and he's here and he's looking around and he says 2 things that definitely perked my ear up. One was, we have to replace it to, magic words, bring it up to code. I've lived here for over a year. Bring it up to code.
Oh, no.
And then he said, also, your carbon monoxide levels are a little high. Now, I have a carbon monoxide detector, and I was like, oh, God, is there something wrong with this? And he goes, no. Mine is more sensitive, and I'm taking readings at the top of the, like, at the ceiling because it's lighter than air. He's like, don't run it, but you're fine. Like, don't run it. If you have to run it, because it's not, technically, I could run it. Like, it works, but it only kind of works because eventually it overheats and blows cold air instead. So
yeah, that's no good.
But like technically I could run it if I needed to, but then there's the carbon monoxide problem. So he's like, don't run it at night. And I'm like, Christ alive. Okay. Anyway, now he leaves. He gets 20 minutes down the road or whatever, calls me back and is like, hey, I just got off the phone with my boss. I'd really appreciate it if you didn't mention that I told you about the carbon monoxide, because they told me not to tell you.
What?
Because my property manager told their boss, told them to not tell me. And I was like, all right, I'm all worker solidarity. I ain't looking to get you in trouble, but I'm going to be honest with you. At some point, I am probably going to have a conversation about that.
Oh, no, absolutely.
With my property manager, because that's absolutely fucked. Absolutely fucked.
Oh, my God.
Like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I have big lung capacity. It's, but like, I have
you
a pet.
have a child who lives in that house with you sometimes.
Yeah, and a pet. Like, that's the, a tiny, like a little
who's there
cat.
all the time.
Who's there a lot. Yeah, like, I'm
Jesus.
fine. What about these tiny lunged beings?
Yeah.
Anyway, I was like, are you kidding me? And that was the second guy. So after that chicanery, they had to have a third one come out, who came out like Friday night to take a look at it when it's already 20 degrees and I know what my night's going to be like. Ugh.
Oh my God.
It's pretty not great.
Oh my God.
Not great.
Well, I'm very sorry, but I'm really glad that guy told you, because that's super dangerous. And I'm glad that you're still here to do the show today, because it would have been real sad to lose you, but if we didn't do the show. I know. Come on.
Yeah. And as I sit here recording this with like coat and scarf on, I am the goddamn winter soldier.
You are the winter soldier.
Fighting through.
All right. I think that's about as good a segue as any. Jack, roll the summary music.
In Captain America #8, The Winter Soldier Part 1, it's Matryoshka dolls of flashbacks to show how Karpov found Bucky 78 years ago and what Bucky and the gang were up to just last night. Speaking of last night, Philadelphia is in a shambles after Cap is forced to watch the destruction of Lucan's bomb and its aftermath. AID, Advanced Ideas in Destruction, is trying to get its stuff back, or at least gather some research on how effective their destruction is. Hint, pretty fucking effective. They also call in the MODOK Squad, military organisms designed only for combat, and goddamn do I love superhero comics, you guys. Come on, that's beautiful. Just when one of the MODOKs has Steve dead to rights, he's saved by the Winter Soldier, who Steve recognizes as Bucky, which is more than we can say for the soldier, who responds with, "Who the hell is Bucky?" Today, Fury finally comes clean with Cap about his suspicions as to the existence and identity of the Winter Soldier. Despite seeing his old protege with his own two eyes, Steve doesn't buy it. It ain't just a river in Egypt though, pal. And since Lucan is the only suspect, Fury's putting together a mission to snatch him out of his own private property, which is pretty fucked, and one of those moments I have to try and keep reading even though everyone in this book is just a fucking crooked cop. Breathe. Woosah. Anyway, Steve is all in on the illegal operation because of course he is. Nick tells Sharon that her ex-boyfriend is the guy who found the bomb and won't be attending S.H.I.E.L.D. staff meetings anymore. Sharon is shook, but we don't camp there for too long because we have to get back to 1945. Back in 1945, Karpov is pulling Bucky's mutilated near corpse out of the ice-cold water and is all but steepling his fingers and saying, "Excellent, Mr. Burns style." The big last page reveal is to, I guess, make sure we at least believe that Bucky and the Winter Soldier are the same guy. Insert ominous musical sting here.
Okay, oh my god, I cannot tell you how happy I am to be back in Brubaker land, to be here with Captain America. This is my kind of story. But before I get to my response, which basically that is my response, Josh, what is your overall response to this issue?
Okay, it's still bangers. There are no complaints. This is good stuff. This is maybe a little bit of a slower issue, even amongst slow issues, which is interesting because last season we went from Cap to JLA.
Yeah.
This time going from JLA to Cap, I'm reading this feeling like I'm on fucking Quaaludes. Like it's just such a massive gear shift down, like whoa, whoa, whoa. Even the blowing up of Philadelphia feels positively, parochial and tiny in comparison.
We're just strolling.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Gather around the campfire, friends. We'll tell you a tale of the Winter Soldier in this boardroom. And I'm just like, a minute ago we were fighting angels. God.
Right, okay, yes. That's an exterior story, right? That's all the stuff that's going on outside. You get a little bit of, like, every now and again, a little bit of a hint of Superman's, like, internal stuff that's going on. But the main action here is internal. The main action here is Cap's struggle with all this. We have some of the, we have a lot of flashbacks. We have a lot of, like, going back in time and kind of, like, setting everything up and seeing how we got here.
Yes, yeah.
But I love that we are in an internal storyscape. Now, the thing is, I don't mind an external storyscape.
Yeah.
I think that that's fine. There's places for that, and that can be a lot of fun. But I do prefer either a balance between the two, which I think is what we get here, or a lean in more into the internal storyscape. I like seeing characters struggle with what's going on.
Definitely.
I like seeing them try to figure out, what it means, how they feel, all of that kind of stuff. So for me, this is like the dessert at the end of everything that we've done so far. Second I looked at the cover, and the cover, like, let's go ahead and talk about the cover art. The cover is, Cap's shield, beaten up, grungy, on a field of debris with Philadelphia burning in the background. And you just see the shafts of fiery light reflecting off of the shield. And for me, like, I love it. Is it the 8 million ways to die kind of cover that you get from JLA? No. Is it the ridiculous Patsy being shot off a cliff in a van that's already died 4 times and has a stone wheel on one of the? No, it's not that. But I Absolutely. Like, I am so grateful to be back with Brubaker at this point. Even though, like, I've enjoyed definitely, like, what we've gone through this whole season. Like, it's been really neat. I have so much fun reading comics. Comics, I think, are amazing. And I'm having a really great time with that. But just, like, this is the kind of story stuff that is made for me. And this cover art speaks to me at my heart and soul. I love it.
Well, and I think it's a great cover. Like, it's really evocative. It's not very exciting, but it's like also right in line with that's why I'm trying to sort of separate my, wait, what are we doing? Reaction.
We have to gear shift.
From dealing with this specific thing. Because it is gorgeous. And as I said, I don't know a better word. It's just evocative. Like, it's both on fire and in destruction and incredibly sad, which is exactly what this issue is all the way through.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely tells you what kind of book you're picking up, even though it's not necessarily, blowing your wig off.
What's really funny, though, is I'm looking at my notes, right? And I have the line in my cover art notes. I like a quieter story sometimes. All right, let me just tell you again. It is Cap's shield on a field of smoking debris.
Right.
And Philadelphia is on fire.
But it's,
Right? But we're talking about, it's all about the neighborhood, right? It's all about the neighborhood that you live in, right? And this is our neighborhood at the moment. It is going to take us, I think, just a minute to like kind of come down, to kind of move from that. All right. So the interior art, what did you think about that?
Well, I mean, it just remains stunning, both Epting and Lark, because we get some flashbacks. So Lark has some pages in here as well, which, as we've mentioned, well, they're in black and white actually in this one, and they're similar to Epting's style, but different enough that even if they had colored it normally, we would have known we were in 1945, right? Like we would have got that it was a flashback. It's just incredibly well put together. And there's one particular thing we're going to talk more about when we get into the story response, but there's one place where the art just really stands out for me. And I almost never want to do this. I almost never want us to do any comparisons to movies that borrow from the comics we're covering. But one really stark thing is how different Epting's conception of the Winter Soldier is from the way Sebastian Stan winds up playing the character in the movies. And we'll talk more. There's not a better or worse, but it just really sticks out to me that it makes it a really different, it changes the flavor of the story, I guess. Like the story is not the same because but like the Steve and Bucky relationship story, it just gets seasoned differently depending on the acting. And here's Epting making some acting choices that are great. And then when it gets translated, completely different acting choices are made. And it's also great. So it was just, that stood out to me because of the comparison.
Oh, definitely. All right, well, let's go ahead. Let's move into our story space here, which again, like, as I'm looking at all of these people shooting at Cap, he's carrying children through fire. And I'm like, yeah, it's a little quieter.
It's it's only one MODOK squad, not the bull host of heaven.
And yet, I think we still have a lot of tension. We still have a lot of, action and excitement and stuff that's going on here. Sure. It's just that it's deeply rooted in this interior experience for Cap and everything that he's going through. Because we're flashing back between a number of different spaces. We're flashing back between we've got Cap last night flashback. We've got 1945 flashback. And we keep like going back and forth between all of these spaces to where Bucky was first brought in, to where Cap was last night and what he was experiencing and what's going on right now with Fury and Cap and Sharon, in the boardroom meeting, basically.
Right. In the nominal present.
In the nominal present. Right. So there's so much going on. And actually, like, one of the things to talk about really is flashbacks, because generally, Like, I don't care for flashbacks that much. You don't usually care for flashbacks that much. But I don't think either one of us was really bothered by this.
Not at all. In fact, that's why I kind of wrote it down, because I was like, this is actually working for me. Even though one of those flashbacks is one of the hackiest fucking flashbacks in the world. The meanwhile, when the more exciting shit was going on kind of flashback.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But for whatever reason, these really like flow and work together for me. I'm never confused, even though it's legitimately a double flashback. Like, the reveals, it causes the reveals to happen sort of in the right order, with the exception of I'm a little confused of why we're so in love with that big full-page reveal of Bucky back in 1945. Like, we know by that point, so I'm a little confused by that one. But overall, it really makes the whole thing work. And so my note is literally, these flashbacks work for me. Does my hypocrisy know no bounds?
I don't think so. I think it's about execution. I think it's about the reason why people use flashbacks. Like, here we actually have flashbacks that are sort of weaving in and out from each other, right? And we have Cap reliving, and that's, and even though he's like now in the room with Fury and with Sharon, when you have a trauma, and Cap still feels like all of this stuff, Philadelphia exploding. I mean, it's not maybe Tuesday for Cap, but it's like, the fourth Thursday of the month, right? Everything's on fire, people are shooting at him, yada, yada, yada. But this is still a traumatic experience for him. Like, he hasn't shut himself off to where he's not feeling it. And for anybody who's been through trauma, you relive it and you relive it and you relive it over and over and over again. So I feel like this is the moment for Cap. Right? Fury's talking and he's rescuing those kids. Fury's talking and he's saying, Bucky, Fury, so all that stuff is happening. The 1945 flashbacks, I think, are probably the ones that feel a little more out of place, especially because, yes, we do know, like, there's nothing in there that's a big surprise. We know that Karpov was behind it. I think the big thing in the 1945 flashbacks is the moment where you see Bucky, like in the water, but also missing his left arm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So like his arm is completely gone. So it's not just that he's been traumatized and knocked out and like, in the water and drowned to some degree, but also probably frozen because it was cold water. There's a whole bunch of stuff involved in that. But that we see the connective tissue between the last time Steve saw Bucky and now, so we're seeing like what that was. So I feel like in some way, this is Bucky's big moment of transition and trauma, and that maybe this is something that he is reliving in a way, even though he wasn't there in the early parts of the flashback where they're just talking in the submarine and they find his body. So I feel like we've got, Steve's experience and flashes, and then Bucky, maybe, what he's imagining or remembering or whatever about his experience. And what happened to the two of them that, because we also have like the Cap was shot down, kind of thing. Like, so
no, that's literally the same day Cap goes in the ice. Like, it's,
so,
Yeah.
So this is both like an experience for them, like the last shared space that they had was both of them dying together in the water, and then neither one of them died,
Right.
And here they are back, and now we're coming back full circle. So I feel like there is something to it. Again, like flashbacks can be a little hacky sometimes, because I think that oftentimes when writers go to flashbacks, they go to flashbacks so that they can deliver exposition. Right? Or because there's something in the past that they wrote that was really, really great, or a great moment in the past, and they just want to be able to write that scene. By the way, writers, you can write that scene. You don't have to put it in your final product. I'm just saying, go ahead and write it. You don't need it in your final product. But in this instance, I do feel like these flashbacks are taking us through these two traumatized characters and reliving that trauma, right? Because that's how you process trauma, is you tell that story. You tell that story over and over and over again. So for me, I think that there is a very deep, like emotional, real psychological resonance to reliving these experiences. And I think that that's, to me, why it feels like it comes together, even though it is, kind of like hatchet together. We've got these little bits and pieces of each story as they go. And I like it. I got to say, like, again, everything can work. Voiceover can work depending on the circumstance. Flashback can work depending on the circumstance. Prologue can work depending on the circumstance. It's just that a lot of times writers go to all three of those for exposition, and that's not why you should be using any of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, with the 1945 stuff, there is a certain amount of, I would almost say metatextual necessary, explanation, because we are all sitting there going, okay, we have accepted that Bucky is back, but we do have one question, and that is how. It's dealt with in pretty much the most economical fashion so that we can all go, oh, like that, and move on. Mm-hmm. But also, it's not quite the level of sort of poignancy that we're getting from Steve and Sharon, obviously. Yeah. But Karpov, who is sort of our proto-Lucan, right? Like when it's too early to be Lucan, Karpov is our Lucan stand-in, and he could not be more happy with this development. Yeah. It's just so even in this where we are, if there's anywhere that's checking a box, the 1945 flashbacks are it. That like necessary stuff, we gotta say it, but we're also gonna like inject some amount of emotional storytelling into that. It goes back to our conversation about don't let things do one thing when they can do 2 or 3 things in your story.
Absolutely, which is not really a choice for comic books because there is no space and there is so much story. 10 pounds of story in a 5-pound bag. But I absolutely love the way that this is moving along. I was excited, even though we don't really get Lucan, in this. We get a mention of him with Fury at the, towards the end. But I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about Lucan. Like, oh my God, it's a complicated villain. It's a villain who has, all of these things going on. And yes, he's bad and he's wrong, but also at the same time, like there's a certain level where you're like, I get it. Look what this guy's been through. Look what he's, trying to do or what he thinks he's doing, and so like, I'm really excited to be spending some time with Lucan and thinking about that as well. So yeah, there is just like a bunch of stuff in here that I'm so excited to get back to. And I find it very, very strange how comforting it is for me to be back in a story where this is the first time, I think, since we started season 2 of In the Gutter that I haven't opened up a show by saying, I don't know what the fuck is happening here.
That's true.
Like, I actually know what's happening, and I'm very excited about that.
Lucan's return is a legitimately exciting thing. Like, we kind of had to take a break from him, obviously, for the entire flashback issue, like explaining who Nomad and Jack Monroe are. Right. And even then, he's always a lurking presence, but he hasn't been at the forefront. We haven't had him sort of on screen, as it were, in a while. After this issue, the next couple issues, we're going to have a fair amount of Lucan. Not a little in the next one, but a lot in the one after that is going to add additional layers. And since one of my favorite things is, the seed of its own failure is planted by villainy itself. Yes, we're going to get a big fat wad of that with Lucan in the next couple issues. I'm really excited for you to see that stuff.
I'm excited for it too. But what we do get of Lucan in this issue is Fury with a plan. Yeah. So why don't we talk about that a little bit?
Okay. Listen, y'all are going to have to hear this. We actually see the op in the next issue. Okay. So I'm going to try and keep this under control because I'm probably going to be madder about it next time. But honestly, this is definitely one of those places where I know for a fact I read this differently in 2005. Like, I'm pretty sure in 2005, I had barely made my moves out of the land of being a right-wing shithead. And I'm certain that like unilateral choices by extra governmental security agencies didn't bother me. Whereas now I'm just like, fucking cops, man. Why you got to make Cap a cop? I don't need this in my life.
Yeah.
Because it is like, it's illegal. It's an illegal action. They will talk even more in detail next issue about how illegal this action is. And Nick's just like, yeah, but we're fucking doing it. And Cap's like, goddamn right we are. And I'm like, calm the fuck down.
S.H.I.E.L.D. does a lot of shady shit.
Yes.
This is not at all new for S.H.I.E.L.D. And I think that Fury is really interesting, like the way that Lucan is a complicated villain. I think Fury can be really interesting as a complicated hero, except that it doesn't seem like the text sees anything wrong with it either. And I think that's where we go wrong.
Yes.
It's where the text isn't questioning any of this. The text, like when Cap says, yeah, let's go ahead and do that. That sounds good, right? The text doesn't have a moment of, That's not okay, right?
Yeah.
You know, like even if Cap and Fury are into it for their own reasons, which by the way, I don't have a problem with. I don't have a problem with people doing bad shit. That's what stories are about. We all do bad shit and then we learn and we figure it out. But when the text presents it as though it's good and positive and okay, that's where we have a problem. Now, again, let me just say, I say this a lot, but I want to say it again, just real quickly. Nobody's throwing shade on creators. Creators are part of our culture. They create things that reflect us back at us. The problem is not the creator. The problem is us and who we are as a culture. So those are the things that we're critiquing. But somebody who is in a particular culture at a particular time, had I been writing something like this, I might have not known better either in 2005. You know,
that's the thing. Actually, I want to say I don't think that this is an accident. Like I think that the story doesn't give any side eye to this because no one in that room would give any side eye to this, right? Like I think Brubaker is a person who is aware, of all the various ways that our agencies have fucked about in the globe over the last, since World War II, right?
Right.
So I don't think that it's necessarily even, how do I say this? The story itself is staying in character. Mm-hmm. There's no one in that room to give this plan side eye. I want Captain America to do it. Right. That's what I want. Because there's really only this is the thing I've talked about before, is that there's only a handful of full bore white hats in the Marvel universe, even on the good guy side. Right. Mm-hmm. And Cap is almost always one of them, along with Spider-Man and the Thing. Like everybody else has got real shades of gray, but those three tend to just be moral compasses. Right. But here he's so emotional. Steve is so emotionally compromised. I'm not even mad about it. It bothers me because he's not mad about it, even though I understand why he's not mad about it.
So he would ordinarily give the side eye to the S.H.I.E.L.D. nonsense that we've been seeing all along.
I'd like to think so.
Because that's the thing. Right. But
not always.
But the fact that nobody's in the room to give it that side eye is still a choice not to have anybody.
True.
I mean, Sharon could. Sharon could.
Oh, no, but she's a harder ass spy than, she's low-key a harder ass spy than Nick.
Okay.
So.
Right. But you could have put somebody in that room who would do it, or you could put something in there that would be a surprising thing. Like maybe Sharon would be surprised that Steve isn't complaining or something like that. I don't know. And again, if you know the characters better, there may be some textual side eye that I'm just not picking up. But I do think that those are the kinds of things that this is us reflecting us back at us.
Sure, absolutely.
So I'm just as long as it's clear, we're not throwing shade on creators who do this stuff without realizing that they're doing it because they're part of a culture that they are just reflecting. So I think that's, that's definitely a shady moment. But I am so thrilled though to be back in this land of emotional storytelling. We see Steve in this meeting just freaking first of all, trying to stay present. And the flashbacks into last night, I think, are absolutely what he is experiencing in the moment. I think that he is, in this moment, going back and forth, right? Staring at images of Bucky, and then when he says Bucky, and then the guy says, who the hell is Bucky? And he doesn't know. He's completely in this space where he is not entirely sure what's going on, and he's really resistant with, deciding that this Winter Soldier who has aged 5 years and 8 decades or however long it's been, that this is his best friend, and that even if it is, his best friend, it's not anymore. It's not Bucky. There's a loss that comes along with that. There's so much stuff going on in this space that I'm really loving. And we're getting that background on who is the Winter Soldier? What is the Winter Soldier? Associating the Winter Soldier with Bucky. How does that work? All of these things. And coming from a guy who hasn't aged in 70 years or whatever. Now he's looking at his buddy who hasn't, I guess at the point this was written, it's 60 years. But nevertheless, still, not only has his buddy not aged, not only is his buddy not dead, but his buddy is an assassin. His buddy is somebody that he is going to be sent after. Mm-hmm. All of that is incredibly complicated. And to also know, you're talking about this, that Bucky was basically put into a cryogenic sleep and then only woken up to go and murder dudes.
Yeah.
what the fuck? Like, it is such a mess. And to realize that someone that you love dearly, has been gone all this time. You've been grieving that relationship only to find out that they're here and they're the enemy. They're the one you have to go after. Like, this deep stuff, when Cap smashes the monitor, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I love, Cap is a guy who usually keeps it together.
Right.
If he's throwing a fit, it's bad. Like, things are bad. You see his body language in this. He's slumped over. His arms are crossed over. He's not even looking at the monitors. He's not looking at Fury. He's not looking at anything. He's just staring at the table in front of him. It's so heartbreaking. And after, like the mayhem, the pastel mayhem that was Patsy, and then the JLA pulling the moon down from space kind of thing, right? All of this stuff is angels and demons and everything. And now we're going back into, I cannot believe I'm saying this, a smaller story space.
Yeah, yeah.
And when Winter Soldier is a smaller story space, that is always an interesting kind of comparison to have. But yeah, like, I love being in that deep emotional space. It's so fun.
And I think, though, it's not just smaller than Patsy or the JLA. Like, I think it's purposefully made more claustrophobic. Like, the comparison to 70s Cold War spy thrillers cannot be overemphasized. Like, this is a superhero comic. We have to have some action, but then what do? We go back to a boardroom, where we talk about.
Right.
I mean, which sounds, normally for me, if I said that, it would be very shady, but
right.
Because there's all this resonance, because we want to make it close, because we want to make it feel like they are hemmed in by the circumstances going on around them, that Captain America is hemmed in by his memories, his facts, his emotions. It should feel claustrophobic, and they do it. They absolutely do it. It's not just a smaller story. It's a relatively smaller story told even smaller,
And yet Philadelphia is on fire. Like,
right.
This is the thing. Like, how, like, it's not just like the way the JLA did this, incredibly, and like, generally in DC, the scale is so much broader and all of that. But like, how, even if you're just looking at Cap and we're not in any comparison space to anything else out there, the fact that it feels like a small story in small movements when Philadelphia is on fire, when people when MODOK is called in.
Well, but small moments even happen in the midst of that. Like, before we're fighting MODOKs, Cap fails to he saves some kids, which is awesome, but then he fails to save this husband who is free but staying there with his wife who's trapped under debris, and he doesn't get there in time. And I mean, it's such a relatively small moment on the way to the action of the MODOK squad and running into Bucky, but the fact that that's included in the flashbacks that are fucking Steve up in the boardroom, not an accident. He, like, the loss of life, he's so angry at Aid because they're just all this destruction, all this misery. You're just looking at it like it's a bunch of ants under glass. Fuck you guys. And then proceeds to, break Jaws in a way that we can all agree Jaws should be broken. Right. I mean,
right,
again, not an accident. No accidents. No wasted moments. All of that's in there for a reason. And all of it is preying on, I really feel like even those innocent deaths are preying on Steve at least as much as the Bucky angle, Yeah. That's like a force magnifier, but otherwise he'd still be all in a twist, because all of this is just like, I mean, all of this is really just like supervillain dick measuring bullshit. All these people died to prove some points, both by Aid. Yeah, we can do it. And by Lucan, I can fuck up your universe, Steve. Difficult for him.
No, it's so incredibly devastating. And that moment with Bucky is just so, and he's looking at Bucky and he's saying Bucky. And then tomorrow he's going to be in a boardroom denying that it's Bucky. Like that whole trauma process of trying to understand what happened to you being so beautifully portrayed here. and like I absolutely love all of that. But the MODOK thing. All right. So for people who did not listen to Listen Up A-Holes, I don't remember which episode it was in. It was fairly early on.
I think it was Iron Man 3. Because I do not love the way that Iron Man 3 came together and thought that it all would have been a lot more interesting if instead of Extremis, we were fucking around with turning Guy Pearce into MODOK. The mobile organism designed only for killing. That's, So I'm pretty sure it was Iron Man 3.
I think it was. But the whole thing being MODOK... is again, what does it stand for?
So
the one for only for killing?
The real MODOK, the one that is in charge of AIM, is a mobile organism designed only for killing.
Yes. And it is this weird 95% head thing. It's so weird. I'll see if I can find the original image. But Joshua basically said, all right, he held this thing. He had the link in the script. And during the show, I wasn't allowed to look at it before the show. During the show, he made me look at it. And then there was my response to that, which was, oh my God, this is obscene. Like, it's so freaking weird. But because that was such a defining moment of Listen Up A-Holes, one of those things we have referenced so many times. When
Your reaction
saw
was
MODOK,
priceless. Yeah.
I was first thing I did was I texted Joshua and I was like, oh my God, MODOK. And then I was like, oh wait, no, but they're spelling it with a C, not a K. So it must be something different. And then I was like, oh, military operatives designed only for combat. Whatever.
Okay, no, in comparison to MODOK himself, almost any other version of MODOK is going to be a disappointment. That dude is just like so much power and so much intelligence wrapped up in such a petulant and petty shell that like almost no other version of MODOK is gonna compare. I do want to point out to you that sometimes in the stuff that skews younger, they still spell that MODOK with a C, and he becomes a mobile organism designed only for conquest, which, to be honest, I think is better. Because when he's leading AIM, he's not just like trying to murder dudes. He's like, no, we are taking over the world. Like that's the, like a real Cobra Commander vibe. Also, there was an issue where all of the Avengers got turned into MODOKs, and that was pretty fascinating. I'll try and dig up an image of that for you. Yeah, we're not reading it. Yeah, no, but that moment was great.
Definitely have to see that.
But what I appreciate about the squad is that it ties into all of this larger lore in a way that makes sense for Aid, who's a splinter of AIM, right? Mm-hmm. But gives us a different way to be scared of MODOKs. Like that Steve is just like grabbing people by the lapels and like, you've got 2 seconds to tell me what in the good goddamn that means, And then when they tell him, and then it's a squad and he's fighting them, and there is a real, at least I personally read that page as a very I'm too old for this shit, kind of moment that Steve looks up at him and he's like, all right, let's do this. Like he's not even, excited about it. And then later when they're like, increase speed by 20%, he's like, hive mind, great. Like there's no... Remember a few issues ago when he was like, I know how to beat AIM. They've never made anything that didn't require a bajillion gigajoules of power, and I'm just going to joyfully destroy this. This is like the, God damn it. Like, it's... I'm so excited to know this thing about AIM, and then this is the like, well, these fuckers. It's always this shit. It's always
this shit. Right. Yeah. Well, I like that. I like that he is, almost bored. That he's just like, I am way too, because like, yeah, he looks 35, but this dude is like 110 now. Like,
and he's been doing this is his whole life.
Through it.
This has literally been his whole life.
Forever. And there is nothing that they are going to think up that he hasn't faced in some way before. And he's like, all right, let's do it. Here, we're going to throw the shield. I'm going to smack you in the head.
I'm going to get stabbed in the side. They actually managed to stab him in the ribs.
And he's just like, whatever. Not my first rodeo, dude. Like, he's been through this before. Like, I want to see Cap at something he's never done before. I want Sharon to take him to the Sheep and Wool Festival in Rhinebeck, New York for a weekend. I want to see that. I want to see Cap trying to knit. a pair of socks. That's what I want to see. But anyway, so we go through this whole thing and we land at the end on this shot of Bucky being pulled out of the water by Karpov. Only one arm, has been in the water for I don't know how long. And somehow they bring him back, they put him together, and now he's going to be their Winter Soldier.
And that's where I wanted to kind of like draw some distinctions between the portrayal of the Winter Soldier in the comics versus the MCU. And again, I am rarely going to do this. The reason that this one jumps out at me is if you read this comic book, this version of the Winter Soldier is all hard edges. Like,
yeah,
he's not just frowning every time we see him, but it's like this deep, just like I don't know, like he's your cranky neighbor down the street that wants you off the lawn. Also, he'll murder you, right? Like he's so just hard. Like it's all planes and angles, right? And the approach of Sebastian Stan, who I don't know if Stan could do it any other way, is just like, even as he is this implacable, unstoppable killing machine, he looks like he's real fucking sad about it. Like he just looks hollow inside instead of hard. And it just, the two approaches really flavor the story differently for me. There's just, I don't have a lot of empathy yet for the Winter Soldier in the comic book yet. Like, even all my feelings are for Steve and Steve dealing with this being Bucky. Whereas in the movie, it's like, as soon as we see him, even when he's lurking in the dark, to talk to his boss, these soulful eyes, like Stan is just selling it, right?
He absolutely is. And and here Bucky seems harder, and that is, I think for me, I feel more for Cap in the comics, and in the movies, they're both breaking my heart.
Yes.
But like for Cap, like the fact that Bucky is clearly in there somewhere, in the movies, that Stan is holding a flame alive for Bucky, like in that performance, and in the comic book performance that the art puts on, in Epstein's performance, it's very hard, and we're not sure there's any part of Bucky left in there, that it may not be that he doesn't remember being Bucky, or that he just that's a different person for him. The same way you would look at your toddler self and be like, I have no connection to that person, right? So I think it's an interesting kind of alternative look at it. Both of them are devastating, emotionally. And of course, that's what I just break my heart, comic book. That's what I want. Don't break my brain. Don't throw this Patsy shit at me. Break my heart, and I am yours forever.
All right, here we are. The favorite art, favorite story. For me, all of the stuff in the boardroom is so emotionally fraught. It's not that it's poorly drawn. It's gorgeous. You're right. There's all this acting going on with Cap's body language, but it's sort of spread out over pages on purpose, right? Which means that for me, I've got to look for my favorite piece of art in the more actiony stuff. Not because that other stuff isn't doing its job. It is, but it's not like one moment. It works by being a series of moments, right? So for me, my favorite piece of art is the one page where the MODOK squad shows up and is literally looming over Cap. Like they're higher than him, either because of the shot or the debris or a little bit of both. And then it switches into, all right, let's do this. Just this exhausted, okay, I guess this is what we're doing. Because it's legitimately intimidating and terrifying. Just because Cap is tired doesn't mean that he's under the illusion he'll survive every one of these dumbass things these guys throw at him. Like, you got to admit, one of these times they might get you, kind of thing. So it's legitimately intimidating, and then just ends with his just exhaustion. And I really like the redesign of different elements, really clear visual hallmarks of MODOK designed only for killing, translated into some dudes that can fuck you up hand to hand is really, it's just a lot of like really clever stuff going on for what is kind of a throwaway fight, honestly.
Especially for Cap.
Yeah.
Even Cap thinks of it as a throwaway fight, like whatever. I actually love Cap running through the burning hellscape with 2 kids under his arm and his shield up, deflecting everything.
Oh, so good.
Something about that. It's so beautiful. It's so heroic. It's so typically Cap. And it's also Tuesday. Again, Cap is doing this thing. He's interested in saving these kids, but he's just like, this is just another day for him. He's just doing the same thing again, which I absolutely love for him, because this heroic space that he lives in never is about ego for Cap.
Yeah,
it's never about, here I come to save the day. It's never any of that stuff. It's like, I'm just going to save the day because it's what I do. Then I'll go and get some French fries or, whatever. It's just, he's just been through it so much. So the heroic moments are important to him, but they are also secondary to all the other stuff that he's got going on. But I love the visuals of that. I think that art is just incredible. And especially because we have basically 3 different color scapes going on. We have the black and white from the history. We have the very cool greens and blues from the meeting with Fury and Sharon. And then we have this bright, fiery red, painful, colorscape from those memories of the traumatic memories of the night before. All of that reflecting on each other in this really kind of neat way.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that color, but you're right. The color scheme is really different. They are in hell. It's all reds and oranges and shadows and flickering. There's no movement on the page, and yet still flickering flames is suggested to me. And also, since I give a lot of hassle and will again next week about Cap as a crooked cop, I think it's nice to have a Cap as heroic firefighter moment too. That's part of my big mental shift is I want to think about superheroes as firefighters, not as cops, Yes. And that it's nice to be reminded Cap will do both,
Yes.
It's not
all I think he's more
cops.
Firefighter.
More often than not, yes.
More firefighter. All right, so what's your favorite part of the story? And spoilers, we both picked the exact same favorite part. So.
Yeah, do you want to count down and say it in unison? So it's
all right.
3, 2,
1.
Who the hell is Bucky? It's exactly it. It's amazing. We're building up to it. In one way, we're saps for picking it because, of course, that's the one. But also, that's the thing.
But what else are you going to pick?
It's there to be picked on purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
I absolutely love it. It's freaking heartbreaking. Even with this version of Bucky being somebody that may be too far gone to ever get back. I think that's just adds to Cap's devastation, and his kind of hopeless space that he's in the next day. It's amazing.
And not to beat the dead horse, but it's absolutely a place where I read the delivery of that line from that version of Bucky so differently than Sebastian Stan's take on the exact same line in the Winter Soldier movie. There's real acting going on in both places, and it's so great. It's so legitimately great. We'll be back next week with Captain America #9, The Winter Soldier Part 2, in which Nick, Steve, and Sharon go on an unsanctioned op, and what do you know? It goes badly. Meanwhile, Crossbones continues to honor the memory of the Red Skull in his own unique way, with murder and kidnapping. But who's this girl he's murdering for and kidnapping? Until then, it is hope, my friend, for the future.
Thanks for listening to In the Gutter with Joshua Unruh and Lani Diane Rich. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider talking about it with your friends, leaving a review somewhere, or supporting Chipperish Media, patreon.com/Chipperish.